"I have something to say," she announced, placing her hands on her hips. "I've been cheating on you for a while now." Betrayed and humiliated, he walks away without a word, but not without a plan. Now, she'll learn what it truly means to lose. But we start the video. Let us know where you're watching this video, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe Story Store, and please share your thoughts about this story in comment section. The roar of the engine drowned out the chaos in his mind. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, knuckles turning white. The night air, crisp and cool, rushed through the open window, but inside his blood simmered. His heart wasn't pounding from speed, it was from the storm raging inside him. Her voice echoed in his head, sharp and taunting. "I needed a real man." The words had cut deeper than she would ever know. The smirk on her face, the arrogance in her eyes, it was burned into his memory. The laughter that followed had been worse, not just from strangers, but from the very people he had once called friends. Not one of them had defended him. Not one had told her she was wrong. He had stood there, silent. No anger, no pleading, no shouting. Just a quiet, measured smile as he pocketed his car keys and walked out. If she had wanted a reaction, she didn't get one. But now, alone on the road, the weight of it all crashed down on him. His mind replayed the scene on a loop, every detail sharper than before. How had it come to this? How could the woman he had loved, trusted, shared his life with, betray him so effortlessly? And why had the people he trusted turned their backs so easily? His phone buzzed beside him. Her name lit up the screen. He didn't answer. He wouldn't. But that didn't mean he was done. No, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 hours earlier. The night had started like any other. A house party at a friend's place. Loud music, cheap beer, the smell of grilled meat filling the air. He had been laughing, drink in hand, surrounded by people he thought were his friends. Life had felt good. Normal. Then she stood up. "Hey, everyone." Her voice sliced through the noise. The room fell silent. He looked up, confused. Something about the way she smirked sent a chill down his spine. His fingers instinctively tightened around his glass. "I have something to say," she announced, placing her hands on her hips. "I've been cheating on you for a while now." The words didn't register at first. A strange, hollow ringing filled his ears. The faces around him blurred, but their reactions were unmistakable. Some gasped, some shifted awkwardly, but most just watched. Waiting. And she wasn't done. "It's not me, it's you. You're too nice, too predictable. I needed a real man." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Some tried to hold it back. Others didn't bother. His so-called friends nodded, amused, as if his humiliation was a spectacle for their entertainment. She wanted him to react, to explode, to beg, to give her the satisfaction of a scene. Instead, he smiled. A slow, knowing smile. He met her gaze, held it for a second longer than necessary, then calmly placed his drink down, slid his keys into his pocket and walked out. No words, no anger, just a quiet exit. And in that moment he knew exactly what he had to do. The betrayal burned, but the humiliation, that was unbearable. Every second of that night replayed in his mind, each detail sharper than the last. The laughter, the smirk on her lips, the way his so-called friends had stood there, nodding along like puppets. But pain had a way of forging something stronger. He drove for hours, the city lights blurring past, mind racing faster than the speedometer. His first instinct had been to lash out, to confront her, to make her feel just as small as she had made him. But no, that would be too easy, too predictable. And wasn't that exactly what she had accused him of? No, this wouldn't be a childish act of revenge. This would be a game, a long, patient game. She thought she had won. She thought she had crushed him beneath the weight of her words. But she had no idea what she had awakened. By the time he pulled into his apartment parking lot, the plan had fully formed in his mind. He wouldn't chase her. He wouldn't argue. He wouldn't even acknowledge the pain she had caused. Instead, he would become something else. Someone else. And when the time was right, when she realized what she had lost, when she came crawling back, that would be the moment he'd been waiting for. Not to take her back, but to destroy her. Step 1. Disappear. No calls, no texts, nothing. Let her wonder. Let her feel his absence like a ghost haunting her thoughts. Step 2. Rebuild. The gym became his sanctuary. Every drop of sweat, every aching muscle, fuel for the fire she had ignited. He changed his style, sharpened his mind, cut ties with anyone who had laughed that night. They weren't friends. They were spectators. Step 3. Become someone she could no longer ignore. A week passed, then 2. Silence. He didn't check his phone, didn't wait for her to notice, but he knew she would. People like her always do. And then it happened. His phone buzzed. Her name flashed on the screen. One call, then another, then another. He smirked. Desperation looks good on you. But he wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. Let her wait. Let her sweat. The game had only just begun. 35 missed calls. A flood of messages. I miss you. Can we talk? I made a mistake. He leaned back, watching the screen light up with her desperation. Just weeks ago, she had stood in front of an entire room and torn him apart like he was nothing. And now she was the one chasing him, but he didn't respond. Not yet. Let her wonder. Let the silence eat away at her confidence. By the time he finally picked up, his voice was cold, detached. What do you want? She hesitated. He could almost hear her swallow. I just think maybe we should talk. I know things ended badly, but you mean when you humiliated me in front of everyone? Silence. Then a nervous laugh. That was a mistake. I was just caught up in the moment. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. A smirk tugged at his lips. Number, you made a choice. His voice dropped lower, deliberate. And now, I'm making mine. She exhaled sharply. So that's it? You won't even hear me out? His grip on the phone tightened, but he kept his tone cool. I heard everything I needed that night. Before she could respond, he ended the call. It wasn't about getting even. It was about control. And for the first time, he was the one holding it. She had no idea what was coming next, and that's what made it fun. She wasn't used to being ignored, and that was exactly why this was working. For weeks, he stayed in the shadows, watching, waiting. He went out more, surrounded himself with new people, built a version of himself that turned heads, stronger, sharper, unreachable. And she noticed. Of course she did. The first time she saw him again was at a party. She wasn't expecting this version of him. The man who had once been predictable, always available, now carried himself differently, calm, confident, untouchable. And worst of all, he didn't even look at her. She tried to act indifferent, laughing with friends, flipping her hair like it didn't matter. But he saw through it. The way her eyes followed him, the way she bit her lip when he smiled at someone else. A message popped up on his phone later that night. You looked good today. He didn't reply. Let her want more. Let her crave what she once threw away. Because the longer she chased, the sweeter the fall would be. She couldn't take it anymore. The silence, the distance, the way he moved through the world as if she had never existed. So she made her move. He was at a bar when she finally worked up the courage to approach him. She hesitated for just a second, watching him from across the room. He looked different, stronger, more confident. And worst of all, happy. She hated it. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Hey." He barely glanced at her, taking a sip of his drink. "Hey." She shifted awkwardly, not expecting this, not expecting him to be so indifferent. "Can we talk?" He finally turned to face her, expression unreadable. "Talk about what?" "Us." A smirk tugged at his lips. "Us? There is no us. You made that clear." Her confidence wavered. I made a mistake." Her voice was softer now, almost pleading. "I was stupid. I miss you." He leaned back, studying her, letting the tension stretch just long enough to make her squirm. Then, with a slow smile, he said, "Prove it." Her eyes flickered with hope. She didn't realize she had just stepped into his trap, and there was no way out. She thought she was winning. After that night at the bar, she texted more, called more. She lingered near him at parties, laughed a little too loudly when he was around, dressed in ways she knew he used to love. But he never made it easy. Every time she thought she had him, he would pull away. A half smile, a glance that lasted a second too long, just enough to make her think she had a chance, before he vanished again. He answered her texts hours later, sometimes not at all. He let her see him with other women, nothing obvious, just enough to plant the seed of doubt in her mind, and it worked. Oh, it worked. Her messages became more desperate. Her excuses for calling became weaker. "I just wanted to hear your voice. Do you ever think about me? I don't know why, but I can't stop thinking about you." He smirked at the screen. She was slipping. And when she finally fell, when she was completely at his mercy, that would be when he made his final move. She thought she had won. When he finally invited her to dinner, she arrived dressed to impress, eyes shining with anticipation. She had convinced herself that this was it, the moment he forgave her, the moment they put everything behind them. And for the first hour he let her believe it. They talked, laughed, reminisced. He let her touch his hand, let her lean in just enough to feel close again. And then, just as she thought she had him, he leaned forward, his voice low. "I have something to say." Her smile widened, expecting sweet words, an apology, an invitation back into his life. "What?" He met her gaze, expression unreadable. "I don't want you back." The smile faded. What?" He leaned back, casually dropping cash on the table. "I just wanted to watch you beg." Her face paled, and just like that he stood up and walked away, leaving her exactly where she had left him. The night air felt crisp against his skin as he stepped out of the restaurant. He inhaled deeply, feeling lighter than he had in years. She was out of his life. For good, no anger, no regret, just clarity. His phone buzzed. Another message from her. He didn't even open it. Instead, he smiled. A real, genuine smile. Because revenge wasn't the victory. Freedom was.